Hello, Dan here with SaltRoadPatrol. Gonna go through a league with Grixis Dynavolt Tower. So this is the deck that I'm actually playing in paper right now. 4 shocks, 4 harness lightnings, bread and butter removal spells. You want a couple of main deck negates to deal with problematic things that typically control decks aren't great at dealing with, such as enchantments and artifacts. You know, Heart of Kirin, stuff like that. Anticipate and 4 glimmers, of course, is your card draw spells. Disallow is just absurd. I don't know how many of you gotten a chance to cast that card, but it's usually not very disappointing. Unless you're counting like a 1-drop, and then it's kind of sad. But I've countered the Thraben Inspector with it before, and I didn't feel too bad. To the Slaughter, because you need one way to deal with, like, for example, Ulamog or the Blue-Green Manland. Also, it's an instant, so that's kind of sweet. And Delirium's not as unreachable as you would think in this deck, especially after board when they're, either destroying your Dynavolt towers or they're destroying a Gear Hulk. And a lot of the time you have, even if they kill your Planeswalker, that counts too, because you're already playing Evolving Wilds, instants, and sorceries. So there's an outside chance that you have Delirium occasionally. Radiant Flames, because you need I personally like some number of sweepers in my decks. The whole reason you're playing black is Unlicensed Integration. It's probably the best spell in the format. And then 3 Dynavolt Towers and 3 Gear Hulks, because I really like Chandra in this meta, and playing more than 4 6-drops is kind of messy a lot of the time, especially as we'll get to it in the sideboard, that there's a second Chandra for those matchups where it's good. And then 3 Dynavolt Towers, because the mana is a little shaky when you add a third color, because you add Sunken Hollows and Smoldering Marshes, which don't always come into play untapped. Also adding Evolving Wilds to make them come into play untapped more, so you're adding more tapped lands. That's the other reason why there's only 3 Fumaroles, is just trying to cut down on tapped lands. The only tapped lands you really want are on turns 1 or 2. And then moving on to the sideboard over here, it's not as sketchy as it looks, I guess. The pacification array is for a lot of the decks that want to play 1 creature and attack you, like Metalwork Colossus, or, again, the aforementioned Ulamog off of Aetherworks Marvel, although you have a reasonable game against Aetherworks Marvel itself, just with the amount of counterspells and disruption that you play. 2 dispels for the other blue matchups. Sometimes it gets a little awkward because you get into these counter wars, and having dispel for just 1 mana is so good. And then Ceremonious Rejection, obviously, for all the artifacts that are clogging up this format. Thing in the Ice is a card that's kind of weird. It's kind of like a dexterity card. I like it in a lot of matchups, and some of those matchups I don't even bring it in against. I think it shines against the black-green matchups. They typically board out all their Fatal Pushes and most of their Grasps, which they then stretch a lot of their hard removal, like Murder, Ruinous Path, and such. But Thing in the Ice is one of those cards where I just kind of board it in based on feel. It's just another threat, and it usually replaces 1 Dynavolt Tower and a Chandra, sometimes even a Gear Hulk, just to have a lower to the ground win condition. Tears of Valakut is pretty much just a concession to Heart of Kirin, Heart of Kirin and Aethersphere Harvester are just really obnoxious cards, and it's an instant, so you can rebuy it off of a Gear Hulk, and it just makes it a lot easier to deal with some of those. Third Negate, because there are those matchups where they want to resolve their spells and you really don't want them to. 1 Painful Truce, because apparently Wizards doesn't think I'm allowed to play 5 Glimmers. Second to the Slaughter, because again, sometimes you just need the Edict effect, and especially in the grindy matchups like against Black-Green when a lot of your stuff is dying anyways, you just kind of want to have another thing. And then the third, Radiant Flames, because I think it's deceptively good against Mardu vehicles. I mean, their vehicles are what kick the crap out of you, but being able to 2-for-1 or 3-for-1 their little creatures sometimes allows you to catch back up on tempo, especially after board when you have Pacification Array and Tears of Valakut, and you just have 4 shocks and you have enough cheap removal where sometimes you can just save a Harness Lightning for a Heart of Kirin just because you have a little energy lying around or what have you. And then the second Chandra's in the board. I personally love 6-mana Chandra in this format right now. She's really good at attacking Gideon, and she ends the game very quickly. So there are a lot of games where you burn an Unlicensed Integration with no kicker early just to kill a guy. So it's just like basically easier to cast Murder. And then later on in the game, you can set up lines of play where you're end of turn Gear Hulk, flashback Unlicensed Integration on your blocker, untap Chandra plus. Well, that's 14 damage in one turn. And if you even have like a Dynavolt tower, that's probably like almost lethal. So I mean, it allows you to just turn the corner so fast. Also, zeroing when you have a bunch of reactive cards in hand. Like there were a couple of games when I was playing against Aetherworks Marvel where Chandra's Zero can just dig you out of holding like Dispel Negate against their 3 creatures. And then you get to discard those and draw 3 cards. And even if you discard them, they're not super dead because you can just draw a Gearhulk to rebuy them. And then, of course, the -X functions as a 3rd Radiant Flames, which is kind of one of the reasons why I used to play 3 Radiant Flames main, and then Andrew pointed out to me that Chandra was good. And this deck is more of... It's more of a control deck that wants to turn the corner. In my mind, there are 3 kind of control decks. There are the Draw Go ones, where you just want to play Think Twices and those kind of cards. Then there are the tap out ones, where you just want to play, for example, the Gifts Ungiven style decks, where in Modern and other formats, where you just want to play your threats, like Blue-White, where you just want to play Gideon into Wrath into, you know, whatever your end game is. And then there's turn the corner decks, like, for example, the Blue-White Red Modern decks, and this one, for example, in Standard, where they get behind, they catch back up, but they don't give you a lot of time to like catch back up after they catch up. So, for example, once they reach parity, they're able to kill you reasonably quickly. And I typically prefer those style of decks because, you know, sometimes you just need to get them dead, and I don't like 1-drops. So, thanks for watching the Deck Tech. We'll be back for round 1.